Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on Rash Pixel FM. I'm Pete Wright, and right over there is Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Hello, friend Nikki.
Hi, friend Pete.
We are talking more about friendships today. Last week, we had a great conversation about a little bit of research and thinking about friendships and why friendships are so important in your life with ADHD. And today we have a litany of questions that have come in. And I think you've gone about categorizing these, right? I mean, we have a lot of just areas of questions that came in.
Well, what's so nice is that they're different. Like they all sort of cover different areas.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be really helpful.
I do too. So thank you, everybody who has written in and posed these questions. I hope we get to as many of these as we can in our time today. But before we start, head over to TakeControlADHD.com and get to know us a little bit better. You can listen right there on the website or subscribe to our mailing list for free, and you can jump on and we'll send you an email every time a new episode goes live. Connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD. And if you support the show, if you've been following the show for years, please consider joining us over on Patreon, patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. There you can throw us a few bucks and get access to a lot of great perks that help support this show and our ongoing development and growth. So it's listener supported podcasting. We're public radio podcasting, and we sure appreciate you participating in that. And if you do, you'll be able to join our recently relaunched Discord community. We're growing a community of folks and through online conversation in between podcasts. If you're looking for a great community of folks who are super interested and invested in changing their lives with ADHD, we sure appreciate you giving us a shout over there. Patreon.com. Yep, tiers are different. We've shaken up the tiers a little bit. We've got some new resources, new perks. Check it out. Patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. Okay, friendships and ADHD.
Yes, part two.
Part two.
All right, you're gonna read the questions because you have the Casey Kasem voice.
Here we go. Boundaries. Number one, boundaries. A number of questions came in on boundaries. When to text? How much hanging out is too much? How do you tell someone that you need personal space? This is a big deal. We all need personal space. What is me time? And how do you get more of it? Oh, dear. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a great question. And I think that boundaries for a lot of people, it's difficult because this isn't what the question is necessarily, but what I see is, especially with friends, is, maybe they say yes to too many things, or, they're people pleasers. So maybe they say yes to something they don't really want to do. There's a lot of that going on. So I think that, taking a moment to kind of figure out what your boundaries are, what do you need in a relationship, in a friendship? And I don't necessarily think that you need to tell someone you need personal space, because that might kind of come off kind of weird. But I definitely think you could say, nope, I can't do that tonight. I have plans. And they don't need to know that your plans are, with yourself. Who cares?
I have plans with myself.
Yeah. So I think it's just getting an idea of what it is that you need. And if you're not sure if you're crossing someone else's boundary, I would say to somehow try to figure it out, but it's hard, right? Because sometimes we don't read people correctly. Yeah, sometimes we don't get the social cues that we need, or that we think we understand. And something that I have found is that I have a lot of clients who go straight to thinking the worst. Their anxiety is high and they think this person hates them. Oh my gosh, they must think I'm an awful person.
Totally. We make up those stories, and they're just generally fables. They're false, the stories we make up in our heads.
Yes. And I've had people tell me with absolute 100% they believe they know what this person is thinking. And I'm like, but you don't know what the other person is thinking. But we make these terrible assumptions. So we want to be really careful that we're not assuming what the other person is thinking. And so it's, there's not a real like black or white answer here. I think you kind of have to trust your intuition. I mean, I suppose if you keep texting somebody and say, hey, let's go out, and they keep saying, no, I have plans, after a couple of times, you may want to like back off and think, okay, maybe this isn't going to go where I want it to go or whatever. I don't know. I mean, it's a tough thing. Because of the social stuff, just reading people, it can be difficult.
It is. I also think though, you give it give yourself a chance to grow into the friendship, right? I mean, it is okay to be very candid and be very clear and say, these are things I need. And as you become better friends, as you develop kind of a shared history, you won't need to ask those things anymore. You'll fall into a rhythm and there won't be too much hanging out, because hanging out is a continuum, and sometimes you'll hang out a lot and sometimes you'll be busy and you'll hang out less. And so, I think it's okay in a healthy friendship to have that sort of ebb and flow, as long as you're clear up front, and asking for consent in a friendship, it's okay. Like, is it okay that I call you after a certain time at night? Is it okay that, that we hang out, spend a day together? And then is that too much? It's okay to ask those questions. So,
all right. Okay. Second question.
Next question. How to make friends understand overstimulation and why you have to leave the party early? I love this question because I absolutely deal with this personally.
Okay, so how would you deal with this?
Well, okay. So for me, what I feel like I have learned is if I'm going to a big social event, I often overestimate my impact on social occasions.
Say that again.
I overestimate, and I think we all do this. We overestimate our impact on social occasions, right? So you go to a party and a whole bunch of people
looking at you.
Yes, and that they're going to care so much if you happen to leave. And likely, I don't want to say that no one will notice, because people will notice and they might ask, hey, where did Pete go? He had to leave. But that conversation usually ends there. Unless you're dealing with somebody who's particularly kind of gossipy, and then they'll have a thing. But generally, you can sneak out and it won't be a big deal. The biggest deal is later when you find out, oh my gosh, and then, I don't know, the Kool-Aid man jumped through the wall and there were so many fantastic events that happened and you missed it. But you're okay with that because you got what you needed. You were able to sneak out. Now, if you're the guest of honor, if somebody is throwing a birthday party for you, or oh gosh,
and then you leave.
Oh God, I dread like surprise parties, those kinds of things. Like, because I don't like that much attention on me. Some people do, some people thrive on it. For me, it is anathema. That's a different story entirely, and you need help and support to get through it. And it's okay to sneak off to a coat closet for 5 minutes and just, be present. With yourself. And, I mentioned what is me time. Me time is with you whenever you can. It's always there. It's you. Mm-hmm. It's right there. So if you go someplace, find a quiet corner and just close your eyes for a few minutes, you can often gather your strength for another little while. But, I just think go back to that. We overestimate our impact on social occasions, and it's okay to step away.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, and I think if you're going to the party with somebody, then I think just being honest too, that, hey, I know that I'm probably only going to be here for about an hour. So if you want to stay longer, you're either going to have to Uber at home or, but be honest too about, what your expectations are. So you're not, that other person isn't expecting you to be taking them home and staying as long as you are and all of that stuff too.
Right.
So the third question,
and thank God for Uber in that regard, right? Uber is a saving grace. Uber
I love
and Lyft.
Uber.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just to be able to free yourself from those kinds of obligations if you really need to get away. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next question.
So the third question I'm going to do, just because we've talked a lot about this already, but how to maintain those relationships, right? So we did talk about that in the first, part one. But I do just a couple things to add here. I think it is a give and take from both parties, because no one wants to be the one who always initiates outings, and you don't want to be the one that never initiates them, because the person who does may eventually stop if they're not getting any kind of, response from you. So there is a little bit of give and take, I think, from both people. I think as far as with relationships that, again, you really value, if you're going to be late, I would just say make sure you call and keep them up to date. If you're going to cancel, don't just not show up. These are things that I think are common, courtesy. It's easy to feel shame around being late or shame about not showing up, that you avoid talking to the person. And what I'm saying is that if you want to keep this relationship and it's really important to you, it's okay. Just let them know what's going on. You're going to be late or you can't make it, but don't just not show up.
This is a hard one because it's approach avoidance continuum, right? It's like, which option, if I'm late, if I'm like a half hour late and I haven't talked to this person and they're sitting at a restaurant, which option is going to make me feel less terrible? And when you are in an emotional storm, it's really easy to fall down the avoidance hole.
Totally.
And just think, okay, I can't, I'm not even going to deal with it because the ADHD has gotten better of me already. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to a different restaurant and hide, or I'm just going to go eat a gallon of ice cream or whatever. I'm going to find a way to avoid the pain immediately. And that is it. Like when you are feeling strong, you have to be able to say, I am willing to change. Like, I don't want to be that person, and I don't want to be that person so badly that when I'm faced with the approach avoidance choice, that I would rather do the thing that is hard in the short term, but ultimately will free me from feeling the shame in the medium to long term.
Right,
from letting this person down, because they're just sitting there waiting for me and they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so it is hard. It's really hard, but I hear this all the time. People say, oh, my brain just doesn't work that way. I have ADHD, so I can't be relied upon to make a phone call. I was that guy. I talked about that last week. I was that guy who would not make that phone call. I would just show up late because I would go the avoidance route. Mm-hmm. And it is hard, but it is not impossible to accommodate, to make accommodations for yourself and to change if you feel like if you feel like it's important enough to you. So there you go.
Yeah,
I feel kind of strongly about that.
Well, I do too. And I think that, that's where it comes into this thing, ADHD is not an excuse. It's an explanation. So yes, your brain may not think your brain may end up wanting to go into avoidance mode, but it doesn't excuse you from being rude, and keeping that person waiting. Like, that is rude. And so I think it's making the accommodation and knowing that, like you said, like, I've got to make sure that I make an accommodation for this. It may be where my brain wants to go, but I need to face this now. I would just add this one point, which is that when you're in that kind of storm, right,
there is very little accounting for social convention.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it is totally rude. I totally agree with you. And also, it's really hard to see courtesy when you're just trying to avoid pain.
No,
and so
true.
I just want to say I just want to say that in terms of acknowledging how stinking hard this is.
It is.
If you really are struggling with this piece. And so I don't know. I don't want to belabor that point, but I just want to throw it out there that I get why it's so hard and why that question came in.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. All right. Question number 4.
Number 4, how do you navigate friendships that seem unbalanced? That's a really good question. What do you think we mean by unbalanced here?
Well, I'm kind of wondering if it's that give and take a little bit, right? Do you feel like one person's making more of an effort than another? I don't know. That's just sort of what I'm guessing. the first thing that I said here was, how much do you value this relationship? So if you feel like it's, you're not getting what you need from it, then is it worth maintaining? Is it worth putting the effort in? Or is it worth just sort of accepting that it is what it is? Like this happened to me where I thought this friend and I were really close. I mean, I thought we were really, really good friends. But then there were a couple things that happened that I was like, well, if she was really as good of a friend to me as I am to her, she would have stepped up and done something different. And she didn't. And so for me, it was sort of this realization is that, okay, we don't look at the friendship the same way. I was kind of looking at her as like this best friend, I think she was looking at me as just a friend.
Yeah.
And so I'm still friends with her, but I don't expect the same things from her as I used to. And so, if someone is sick in my family or there's a surgery or something that happens, I'm not going to be expecting her to, bring me a casserole.
Up. Yeah. Right. She's not the emergency contact for your
She's
kids.
Not the emergency contact anymore. Yeah. Which, it's all right.
It happens. I think it's even harder when you recognize that you are the one who is looking at the other person as maybe they think I'm a better friend to them than I am, if you reverse the roles.
Right.
And so when you realize that it's unbalanced because this other person is giving me so much of their life and attention, and I don't have that sort of reciprocal feeling. And that is so hard to navigate. And that may be why it's so hard to make new friends, because the ones I have, I understand the relationship and that balance. I understand that perfectly well.
But with new friends, you're learning all of that. It really is. It's messy. It's messy.
Yeah.
Right. And so that, that's how I kind of came to terms with it. But I also would ask this person to think about where it is unbalanced. Is it fixable? I mean, is this something that you just need to have a conversation about, and communicate like what they are thinking? I had this one friend who is awesome because when we started hanging out, so we would do breakfast. But I remember one of the first lunch or breakfast dates we had, she told me right up front, she's like, Nikki, I adore you. You're going to be a great friend. I know we're going to be great friends, but I've got to tell you, I am terrible at keeping in touch. I'm really busy. I work. I have 2 kids who are like, they are not just athletes. They're like, prodigies.
Premier athletes. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are in sports all the time. She's traveling all the time. And she was just really upfront about it and just said, don't take it personally if you don't hear from me.
Yeah.
And so I don't. It's like we can go a couple months and then when I see her, we catch up and we have breakfast every once in a while and we catch up. But it's like I don't expect anything different. So that's what I think too, is having that conversation. And I mentioned this before. I don't remember if it was last week or here, but I think some friendships they're seasonal. I think that they come and go. It's and that's all right too. You can I think that just happens. It doesn't mean that anything you did made that happen. It's just that's the way.
Contexts change.
Yeah, right, right. All right, number 5.
Next question. Lateness, not being the one to initiate plans, having lots of last-minute crises are all signs of a one-sided relationship, but also just side effects of ADHD. How do you use the strengths to contribute and show you value the relationship and mitigate the flaky vibe? I feel like we've sort of talked about this. For me, it comes down to that just transparency, right? And being super honest. It's different than a work environment, right? A work environment, you sort of have the choice to say, I'm going to talk about my ADHD with my manager, right? I want them to support me. I want them to support me with, the resources I need to be successful. With a friend, if you're trying to cultivate a relationship, not only will they understand you better if you are honest with them about your ADHD, the act of being honest with them says a lot about how much you value that relationship, right? So there's A, they'll understand how you relate with time and attention. B, they'll understand your willingness to be vulnerable and treat that relationship as something that's worth cherishing.
Yeah. I agree. Well, and I think that this is also where you use the tools and strategies that you've learned from listening to this podcast, from going to seminars, from listening to other workshops. I mean, anything, books that you've read about ADHD, get into your toolbox and figure out, what are some things that you can do so that you can prevent some of these from getting in the way. As often as they are. Not to say that they're never going to go away, because that's just not, realistic. But, definitely pay attention to it and see, what can you do if there is anything you can do. But I think the transparency part is definitely really important.
Next question. This one, I feel like this was sort of a basket of issues that we may have already talked about. Let me know what you think. How do you communicate ADHD related needs without seeming overly demanding or feeling guilty about it? As an example, I have a friend who likes to do things spontaneously. She'll call me at 8 and ask if I want to go to breakfast at 8:30. It's hard because, of course, I want to, but my life has a lot of moving pieces that I'm struggling to keep in order. I love to be spontaneous, but it throws me off balance for the rest of the day. Or when people are very late or very early for things, I get either flustered because I'm not ready or frustrated because I put a lot of work into being on time. My natural tendency is to be late, but I work very hard to be punctual.
When I first read this, whoever wrote this, I just want to say kudos to you for putting so much effort into your time management. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, this is somebody who is paying attention to these areas and is working really hard to make it work for her. The act that she even recognizes those areas is a sign of great diligence and practice. Building those muscles, it's huge. Yeah. So something to be very proud of. So no reason to feel guilty or feel like you're being demanding. I would get those words out of your vocabulary right away when you're talking about this, because I don't see that in this at all. What I see is somebody that has issues with transition. It has issues with having a plan and then having it go it goes fuzzy.
Yeah.
And so that's the issue. And I think that, going back to, some of the things that we've talked about for the friend who calls last minute, being honest with her and just saying, hey, this doing last minute really throws me off for the day. And so could we at least plan the day before? Mm-hmm. Let's plan a day before so that way I can really, plan for my next day and not be, thrown into tailspin. So you're kind of preventing that from happening.
Right. Because by 8 o'clock, I'm already well into something else.
You bet. And if you've actually taken the time to make a plan for the day, you don't want to screw that up. That's a big achievement. I mean, you just, that's huge too. So I would be honest about that. The people that are coming, into your life that are coming either early or late, we can't control what other people are doing. And so what I would say is that this is where you're going to have to practice how you deal with that frustration when it happens. And what do you do to bounce back from it to salvage the rest of your day, which is a talk that you and I did. And it will be in one of our workshops, if you're a Patreon member.
Outstanding.
So, but that is, I think the issue here is just how do you recover from that? Because that is really what's happening, is something's coming in unexpected. And it's and I learned as an ADHD coach very, very early on in my career, never show up early.
Yes.
Never call early, never show up to anybody's house early, because it puts them into a fluster and they feel bad. And I don't want anybody feeling bad. So,
Totally agree with all of that. And then I think that transparency and the balance in the relationship. I usually, when I'm if I'm teaching something, if I'm doing a live class or something where there's an audience or something I prepared for, I'm usually fairly pedantic about starting on time. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something I need to probably work on that, because I'm always doing it with a little bit of a sense of passive aggressive kind of a dig. Like, if this were important to you, you would have been here on time, which is not always right?
Right,
Life
yeah.
intervenes for people,
You
and
bet.
sometimes they are as impacted as we are. And, and so I need to be more understanding about that. And I've been working very hard to do that, and to try to have a plan B for, if I have to start late, what can I cut from my meetings or presentations that would keep us on or get us back on schedule. So just a little something to add.
So we're going full circle here, right? Because if you look at part 1, when we did the last week, we started the show and you asked the question, and there was some what am I talking about? Not feedback. There was an update about somebody. Yeah, there was a follow-up with the support group.
Yep.
And then you asked the question, how many people do you find, don't believe in ADHD, or they have these support systems that don't believe in ADHD? And so we started it with that. And then what are we going to end with?
Last question. How do you handle other ADHD friends who claim they've, quote, outgrown distractibility and hyperactivity? They've outgrown their ADHD.
So if we were emojis, we would be the emoji with the little hand on our chin. Interesting. So what do you think, Pete, right?
I've got to tell you, with all due respect to these folks who say that they have outgrown distractibility and hyperactivity, I would have to see some more detail about their specific circumstances, because generally I find that claim dubious. You outgrow a shirt, right? You outgrow your pants. You outgrow your shoes.
Right.
You know what I mean? Your family could outgrow your house, right?
Yeah,
you outgrow those things. Yeah. You don't outgrow ADHD. In my experience, I've never met anybody who's outgrown your ADHD. What you do is you mitigate your ADHD. You accommodate your ADHD characteristics, right? You change your life in such a way that ADHD doesn't have as significant an impact on those areas that were impacting you previously. And I feel like after doing this for 20 years, I have mitigated a lot of my own ADHD characteristics, but they're always here. They're always here. I never forget. Hashtag never forget. That I live with this as a buddy on my shoulder, like always doing this. So I have a really hard time with that statement. Now, I toss it back to you. How do you deal with the folks who say that they've outgrown it? What do you think? Am I coming down too hard on that?
Oh, no. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that exactly what you said. I think that they've probably have come to a point where they can, they're coping with it. They're navigating their life smoothly. However, when a different event comes, it could come right back at you. I mean, right? Because it's also events. I mean, transitions and these things that happen to us as we live. Your ADHD is going to look different as you're going through those situations. So, for me, it's kind of like, okay, my first instinct was that, hey, that's great, good for you.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't get into a heated debate. I wouldn't get into a heated debate. I don't think it's worth it. Now, that's me personally. It's not worth my energy to try to convince this person that they've outgrown this.
And they likely believe it deeply, right? They likely have convinced themselves. But it probably stems from a certain sort of self-judgment, right? And self-doubt that, about their ADHD. And you don't want to step into that hornet's nest. I mean, it's just, you're not, that's not your role.
No.
So
that's what I would say is don't waste your energy. Great. So happy for you that you're at where you're at. Your truth. What matters.
Boy, that's great for you. I sure haven't.
Yeah.
That's great for you. I'm still struggling in these areas. And here's what you need to know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I just, it makes me cringe too, because there is that sense of, they don't believe it, or people think that they outgrow it. And
Yeah. Have you ever met anybody in your travels that has outgrown their ADHD?
No. In fact, when I talk to people, especially when they were diagnosed later in life, they can look back and they see how it showed up in their life at different periods of time. It's just that they coped with it different. And they didn't know that that's what they were coping. They didn't know that that's what they were accommodating. And then when they get the diagnosis, as hard as it is to maybe accept, it also makes sense to them. And so the pieces start to come together. And then as their coach, it's about trying to figure out what to do with this and how to live a happy and fulfilling life without it always, being a challenge. And that, I guess that my first reaction when you said to well, that's great that this is good for you, but it's still a challenge for me. I would almost, flip that too and say it's great, good for you. It's still something that I deal with, but hey, I'm also doing a great job dealing with it as well. But, I don't know. I don't know exactly what to say, but it,
that is, I think that's a great question. And I hope that's just, we don't really have an answer, but we certainly have potentially a new way to think about it and to approach that question and just to stay in your own truth. So that's it. Those are the questions we have for today. So thank you everybody for writing in. If we bundled your questions, if there was anything that was unclear, please let us know in the chat or jump over to Discord and you can mention us there and we will continue the conversation. Thank you so much everybody for downloading and listening to this show. We appreciate your time and your attention. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next time right here on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.